At the end of the day, it's not about what you have or even what you've accomplished. It's about what you've done with those accomplishments. It's about who you've lifted up, who you've made better. It's about what you've given back. Denzel Washington. Welcome to Inspire Vision. Our sole purpose is to elevate the lives of others and to inspire you to do the same.
Joey, welcome to the show.
It's great to be here with you, Dr. Doug. I'm excited for a powerful conversation.
Oh, I am too. You know, it's always so much fun. And one of the things I love to do, and it may be a little different than a lot of podcasters because they usually do this whole introduction and so forth, and quite frankly, I find that boring. But what I'd love for you to do is tell your story, because there's always a journey. There's always something behind where you have reached the point you are with what you're doing. And I'd like you to share that with the audience, who you are and what was your journey.
Absolutely. So I'm Joey Drolshagen. I mean, everything I do is related to, they call me the rapid growth specialist. Everything I do is about rapid growth. It's about bringing on change, bringing about transformation. And really, instead of the baby steps and things like that, or wishful thinking, is to really get clear on what the desire is and then move into achieving that, and doing so without killing ourselves with massive actions, exhaustive efforts. The reason that's important to me is I grew up in a very low income family in Detroit, Michigan, and I watched my parents struggle my entire youth. And when I was like 10 years old, I had this event happen where I spent the night at a friend's house, and his dad gave us $20 to go to Dairy Queen. And in my family, we had to save up to do that. And so and I went back home, and it's like, man, there was such energy difference with it and stuff. And I thought, man, you guys are not living right. And I'm not going to live like you guys do. But then I got into my 20s, and I started experiencing those same struggles. I started experiencing those same, and really one of the ways of explaining this is when I was in my early 20s, if something came easy for me, I thought I didn't earn it because I didn't work hard enough for it. So I didn't deserve it. And I would let those things pass. And every area of my life fit into that programming and such. So as I started going, and I started in a career in sales from the ground up, and I would bust my hump, and I'd travel 3,000 to 5,000 miles a week trying to build territories, and I was getting nothing. And yet I saw other people contract after contract, and growing that way. I saw people in happy relationships. I saw people with a savings account and things. And it was such a struggle to get any of that stuff for me. At 22 years old, I started diving into what's the matter with me. And it's been this 3+ decade of experiences in the unfolding of that.
And isn't that interesting how we get to a point, and not everybody gets blessed to get to that point where they have that aha moment of, you know what, something's wrong here. I've got to figure out what it is.
Yes. And it took me decades to understand it, to continue learning and diving into things and finding out what doesn't work for me, and to get to this point of doing what I do today and helping people rapidly bring about what they want to experience in this lifetime, and quit wasting time and quit wishful thinking their life away.
Well, and you hit a really good thing on the head, and I think this is important for the audience to know. There are so many different ways. And I'm in the same boat you have been in, where I've tried this, I've tried that, and some things have worked, some things haven't worked. And ultimately, you get to the point where you start to feel that connection, that resonance in your life that, okay, what I'm doing now seems to be working. And every once in a while, something comes up and goes, okay, I gotta work on this one. But it's interesting that people are going to have to really check things out to figure out what works for them. And that's why I love doing this podcast, because it's interviewing different people. They all have slightly different approaches, but somebody's going to listen to you today, and it's going to resonate with them, and it's going to make a difference in their lives. And that's the whole goal.
Yeah. And with what you said there, Dr. Doug, we all have a pathway in life, right? And we bump up against what I call life's lessons, which are the things that don't work out, but we can learn from them and stuff. But there's a lot of things that could have happened sooner and bigger than they did for me. But because of my programming, which we'll get into, because of the way my perceptions on how I perceive things is what stopped those things from happening.
And it's fascinating how that subconscious, those imprints that are lying there can have such an effect on our lives. And I'm curious, do you ever get into the epigenetics? Because I think that it's fascinating that, you know what, we can experience or we can recognize the subconscious imprints from our childhood and those type of things. But how many times do we recognize that a lot of this stuff is coming from ancestors, and epigenetics is playing a big role in that?
I mean, everything I do does now. We don't have to go back and find out what that is.
No.
You know, when I work with a client, I'm interested in 2 points. The first point is, where exactly are you right now? Right? That's point one. And then the second point, which I help them develop, that is where do you want to be? What do you want to experience life? You know, how do you want to experience life? And from those 2 points, I can help anybody go through that avenue of bridging that gap from one side to the other.
Well, then let's get into that because you've developed this SMT methodology. And can you kind of explain to the audience what that is?
Yeah, so I'll just explain it in a little bit if you get a minute or so. But yeah, so I throughout that 3 decade period, I've gone a lot of books, and when I read a book, I turn it into an experiment. I'll read it one time through, I'll go back and create experiments of it. I've gone through, the things like manifesting and things like that. All of those things. I've gone in self-study. I've gone in working one-on-one with a coach, working in group atmospheres and stuff. And I couldn't figure out why I was investing all this. And I really leaned into it. I couldn't figure out why I'd walk away again and again and again thinking, man, there's something the matter with me. And so once the dial started connecting, once I started understanding the importance of the subconscious and that motherboard in there that hosts all of our programming, that's not just the voice we hear in our head, but it's what triggers the brain waves to the actions we take or we don't take. And so once I started understanding that, once I started experiencing that change happening and such, the SMT method is subconscious mindset training. And it's really utilizing the power we have to reprogram our brain to open up avenues that were not possible for us prior to understanding, to identifying what those programs are, and then shifting those. We wouldn't be able to achieve what we achieved. And a lot of times, the hardships that we go through in life, we can use that as fuel, the energy in those hardships as fuel to launch us beyond what we could have achieved without that hardship. So now we start pole vaulting based on the hard, the tough situations we have.
Well, and it's interesting that so often, we talk about different types of addictions, but so often I think we can be addicted to that subconscious imprint that's going on. And to be able to actually recognize that, and I'll be interested to hear how you do this, but, to jump from there and use that to move into a different mindset and to be able to change the neural pathways. And I think this is so important for the audience to understand that you can change the neural pathways. Those habits have created a neural pathway that just automatically happens. And you literally, through consciousness, can change that and change habitually the way you act into the point of what you're talking about.
Absolutely. And it's those experiences we had, our patterns, our paradigms, our like belief systems, and like you said, our experiences. But, you or I don't even have to have the experience. If we're growing up and we hear somebody talk about how hard business is and how it kills you and everything else and stuff, we're more apt not to ever step out into business like that. We didn't experience it, but because somebody told us it became part of that, that programming and the network of those brain waves and such. So part of the thing is most people don't even realize that they're living by that programming because it's so natural to do the things they do. So I have worked with clients and done things to help them realize how we get into a pattern without even realizing it. Dr. Doug, I did it one time with a guy who said, I don't have any of that stuff. And I go, okay, when you shower tomorrow, I want you to lather your hair 10 times and then rinse. He goes, what's that going to do? I go, just do it. He called me back the next day and he kind of cursed me a little bit, but in a fun way. But he said I couldn't do it. I did it 10 times. And then I went to rinse it. It's like, no. And he went back to his pattern. We brush our teeth. We do all this stuff by pattern. But, and we can use those things to illustrate, not that they're controlling our life, but we're the same way on the bigger things. We're the same way on the opportunities we allow in. We're the same way when we're robotically conditioned all the way through school, where if you and I are working on a math problem and I show it long form and get the right answer, I get full credit. If you, for instance, have a shortcut and you still get to that answer, you get marked down. So we're robotically conditioned to everybody do it the same way. Everybody do it the same way. That's a lot of the analogy with a lot of the programs I had experienced, where it's like we have your A, B, and C. If you do this, this, and this, you're going to get this because we did. Well, nobody, less than 1% of those people following that ever achieve that, because it's not based on their uniqueness of their conditioning, their desires, all of that. So it was really important when I built the SMT method is I've created this journey that's as individualized as each individual who steps into that journey. And that's how it brings results so much quicker, because we're not all doing the same thing like robots trying to get the same, to the D factor. Right? We're finding out, we're developing systems of accelerating habits. We're developing a vision. We're doing these things that are unique to the individual, carrying those forward. And that's how we start opening up that door. And here's why. Because when we're doing those A, B, and C, we can overlook that and live through our programming through the whole thing and not get the results we're looking for. Or we can go through this process that's based on the individual. So we're coming out with a vision that excites us, not something somebody told us we're making $10 million in a week or something, And as we go through and we start developing systems of accelerating habits, we're doing it for the individual that I'm working with. What you and I come up with for your systems of accelerating habits is going to be totally different than mine or anybody else's. So it's really a unique experience to every individual. And that's how people get results quicker.
Yeah, and I love that because, as you say, it's such an individual thing, And the other thing I love what you said is the fact that we don't even know sometimes, we hear something said, and based on our perception, whatever that is, which may not be accurate, all of a sudden that becomes an imprint. And it has nothing to do with family. It has nothing to do with anything other than we heard something, we interpreted it a certain way, and it became embedded as a belief.
Yes. Yes. And ultimately, here's the thing with all of it, regardless of program or what area or whether it's business or personal or whatever it is, when we step into that, when we start moving through that area, we cannot go out and get to that person that we want to be. We have to come from that place inside of us. And in order to do that, we have to be able to identify the patterns, the limitations, the habits, all that stuff that's causing us limitation, shift those, and then that opens up the door to becoming that person.
And that goes about something that I am just so strongly opinionated about, because I hear this so many times in religion, everything else, you need to do this, you need to do that in order to accomplish this and so forth. And it's like, you know what? You need to be, as you're talking about, get in there and analyze and become. And when you do that, then that behavior is just naturally going to follow. And the results are going to naturally follow.
Yes. And we don't have near the limitations. And the problem with, not the problem, the hard part of all this stuff is, like I said earlier, we don't even know we're living through those, through that conditioning and that programming.
Yeah, that is so true. Well, let's get into some specifics here. So What is that method, and how does it really help people to achieve the results that they're looking for?
Yeah. So my whole thing in doing this, what worked for me, and again, what took me years or decades to figure out, my clients achieve in weeks now, So, but what it is we come out of the gate developing what the SMT method refers to as a dynamic vision. So we get a big vision and we get the clarity of that vision, what it looks like, feels like, all that stuff, but we build that vision. Even in doing that, people will tap against that programming. And so as they do, It has tools that we walk through to start shifting that programming and putting it in a line with the vision. And as we're doing that, we start seeing some of that open. So it becomes an exciting process to go through. And as we're stepping through it, we get into, the mind, we get into self imagery, things like that, and how we see ourselves and such. And we start developing systems of accelerating habits. And I'll give you a quick example of that. You ever see somebody do a Facebook Live and you can tell they don't want to be there?
I don't watch those, but yeah, I can imagine.
I feel bad for the person. So that's not that person's wheelhouse. That's not that person's avenue. Now, you ever see somebody who does a live and you can tell they're at home, they're on,
Yeah.
and you watch those longer. That's somebody who's in alignment. That they're that's part of their passion, is doing things like that. So what the SMT method does is it helps each individual find what is that for them, leading towards that vision. And as we start opening that up, what we do is we find more time to spend doing that than the things that we don't want to do and can't stand doing and is really working against us. And as we're doing it, we're continually bumping up against patterns. We have tools to help quickly shift that, and then we can go deeper into it, because you spoke on perceptions.
Yes.
And I have 4 siblings. And when we get together and talk about stories of things growing up that we're all there for, there's 5 different perceptions of that event, because we all have our own perceptions. So if we want to change, if we have to become this, then it starts with, okay, where am I at right now? And then we can back that up to going, what are the perceptions leading me to seeing it that way, which then backs us up into the programming. So we shift the programming, it shifts the perceptions, and it allows us to experience something different in our life.
All right. And, you talk about achieving that desire, those goals and so forth, that vision that they really want. How do you help them? Because I guarantee you that so many times people will say, all right, this is my vision. And yet, guess what? It's not their vision. It's based on all of those imprints in the subconscious. So how do you help people to move away from the imprinted visions of their life and goals and desires and purposes and so forth to where it's genuinely who they are?
Yeah. Yeah. And even to add to that, anything vision wise and stuff like that, even vision boards and stuff can be really powerful. But I find that a lot of people, if I really get down to asking them a few questions, I find out they don't really know what they want.
Yeah.
They just don't want to struggle.
Yeah.
They want to get beyond the struggle, and the toughness. They want a relationship if they're alone. They want to, whatever it is, they want to have some money to go and do things and travel and stuff like that. But most people don't even really know what they want. So the dynamic vision that's set up, and I take 2 weeks right up front in the process to help people define that and help them grow that and help them build that. So there's a vision. There's a powerful vision, which like vision boards and such are, where you got the view of it and stuff, you can see it. But then there's a dynamic vision where you start adding that feeling tone. What's it feel like to live that life being that person? And we add all that to it. And I have helped people. I mean, that's one of the things I do right out of the gate is help people to build that vision beyond what they can believe. A powerful vision is a vision, or dynamic vision is a vision. When you get done writing it, it should be, I have no flipping idea how I'm going to achieve this.
But you tie in the emotions, though, and it seems to me that might be the key. Is that as I'm talking about, all right, I want to accomplish this, I want to accomplish that. Now you're telling me, all right, let's tie it into your emotions, and how does that really feel? And do you find that you're able to actually identify that, okay, that really isn't backed up by a true emotion, and all of a sudden you find something, okay, there's the resonance, there's the connection with the emotion and what you want to accomplish?
Because if we're not emotional about it, we don't really want it. If we have no emotion, I love what I do, Dr. Doug. I love that I get to spend my life doing this. And this is after a 28-year career in corporate America, and I absolutely love it. And so when I think of working with a client, when I sign a new client, man, I do a walk, a walk in gratitude, I call it, where I do. And there's times when I used to wear the headset like you got, and I'd unplug it, and I'd find myself a block away from where I'm at, still having the headset. And I forgot to take them off.
Oh
But
yeah.
yeah, when we have the emotional charge to it, it helps bring it that much quicker than just the visual of it. Now, one of the things I'll tell you is a lot of people, they have visions. They say, yeah, I want $1 million. And I go, okay, why do you want $1 million? Well, because then I'll never struggle with money again. When we're creating what we want based on lack of what we don't have, it's only working against us. So we have to get alignment to the vision as well. So you can see where it goes much deeper than just what do you want, and so when we get that alignment down, like I have a vision right now to raise $5 million. And the reason I'm doing that is because I want to launch my institute to certify other coaches in the SMT program, so it has a greater footprint and reach than what I can have myself. But also, even beyond when I'm gone from this place, it'll continue on. So it's like
Yeah.
my legacy, and I'm really excited about. So that's a different thing than saying I want $1 million because I don't want to run out of money. And what I've seen multiple times is people who come from that are able to gather that $1 million or 2 million, whatever the number is, they automatically switch to being afraid of losing it then.
Yeah.
So the programming stays regardless of the situation or circumstances. So whether you're getting it or whether you're afraid to lose it, the programming stays right in there, afraid of lack.
Well, and it's interesting, being here in Thailand, and I've studied a lot about Buddhism. Being here, I want to understand the people and so forth. And he talks so much about suffering, and part of his entire goal is to help people to get to the point where they are not suffering. And it doesn't mean that they aren't experiencing events in their life that would cause other people to experience, quote, suffering. But they have reached a point in time where when those events happen, it's just like it's not going to affect them from the standpoint of they feel like they're suffering. And I think you've hit it on the head that, fear has such a big role in that. Talk a little bit about fear and what that does.
Oh yeah, fear. I mean, really, the fear is getting outside of our comfort zone, which is challenging that programming is what it is, And as we go forward and such, and we're stepping out, is fear is a huge roadblock. The way we address it within the SMT method is we start to understand how fear is so far side to side we can't get around it, and it's so tall we can never get over it. But most of the time when we go through it, it's paper thin. And I proved that over and over and over, even with my life. I ran off of a 2,000-foot mountaintop with me in a hang glider because I thought I was afraid of heights.
Wow.
And now I do that. I've taken 7 launches so far, on the way to my 15 to be fully certified. And it's when we go through the fear. But I'll tell you, when I did that, and I had 3 steps and I was in the air with no ground below me.
Yeah.
And I took the first step, and everything in my heart, I could feel my heart beating, and my head's going, don't do it, don't do it. And I took the second step, and it got stronger. And I think it was in the second step, I don't even recall, but I could feel my heart beating in my throat. And I'm just hearing this yelling in my head, don't do it, don't do it. But the moment my feet left the ground, it was ecstasy. Amazing. I felt like I was soaring. But so often that fear will stop us from getting to that point. And so what I love to do is help people move beyond that point. And we do that through managing the fear, because we can never get rid of it. Anytime we do something new, there's going to be fear, but we can use fear and instead of it using us. And so we start shifting that side of things.
Well, and you talk about tools, and what I find interesting is I interview different people. That it's I don't know that you have a book. I haven't seen that you have a book. Maybe you do, but
It's right behind me. This side, that life's lessons right there.
okay. You have the book. Okay, great. So
I have a few of them.
What I find interesting is a lot of times people will go, well, I'm trying to promote my book, trying to do this, trying to do that, so they won't get into it. And I'm just a hard shell. I want to know how. What are the tools you're using? Because what I have found is if someone in the audience will listen and understand the tools, can they apply it to themselves without help? Usually not, unless they're really unique. They really need a coach, they need some help and so forth. But to be able to understand what the tools are oftentimes gives them that sense of, okay, that makes sense for me. Now I want to learn more about it. So I'm going to ask you, what are some of those tools that you use in the SMT methodology to help people to really move from that subconscious control to conscious living?
Yeah. Great question. I love that. Conscious living. I love that. That was great, Dr. Doug. There's so much with it, but a lot of it is really all of the tools are geared towards identifying the limiting belief, identifying the limiting programming, and then tools to shift that, whether it's perception shifting, whatever it is that we use, we for a lot to the vision throughout the time I work with my clients, because that's the excitement, that's the carrot, right? And as we start opening up some of that, then we get more excited and we dive deeper into it and such. So that's a big part of it, but it's really about shifting that programming. It's really about taking different actions, like consciously choosing. Wallace Wattles, I love his quote. He says, if you are not consciously choosing to be rich, excellent, and healthy, then you're subconsciously choosing to be poor, mediocre, and unhealthy. And that's really a lot of what it is. It's to shift from living in this subconscious place to living more consciously. Exactly what you said.
Well, and as I hear what you're saying, one of the things that comes to my mind is, I've studied a lot of this, and I've kind of tapped onto meditation and so forth. And I know personally, as well as talking to others, some people, wow, they have an experience real quick. But for a lot of us, that meditation and that affirmation, I do walking meditations, and
Oh, okay. I've done that before.
yeah, there's a lot of reasons, because there's the whole somatic part of the body movement. And, as I've studied, using the binaural beats when I'm listening to the music as I'm walking, and trying to get everything from right brain and left brain connected up there and so on and so forth. But I know a lot of times in meditation, it takes a lot of time to move from one position to another position, from consciousness and so on and so forth. When I hear about the Buddhists, the guys that have become monks, and they are meditating for hours and days and months in order to try to achieve. And what I'm hearing you telling me is, Doug, you could do that really quickly with my method. And I want to know what on earth are you doing to move so quickly versus those of us that are just meditating and really working, trying to get that accomplished. And sometimes it takes months, sometimes it takes years. What's the difference?
You know what? One of the things that takes so much longer is, you're right. You could buy books on this stuff. You could buy books on meditation. You could buy books on mindset shift. Books on it. So, but for me, I bought all those books. I did the experience. Experimented with the book and brought, and I couldn't get the change until I found somebody else to help me, because I didn't even recognize my programming where they could help point that out to me. That's one of the things that really expedites it over doing it one. I mean, I told you it took me 3 decades to truly bring about the changes that I've experienced in my life and such. And if growing up like I grew up, even the fact of you and I being here talking like right now, Dr. Doug, it's unrealistic. It's unrealistic. This kid growing up the way I grew up would build a career in up to a vice president of sales and help companies in bankruptcy back to profitability and even now be doing what I'm doing now and have such an impact on so many people's lives and such. It's unrealistic for that to happen. But what I did when I opened the door to let somebody else assist me, iron sharpens iron, right? They could help me in ways I could not see of my own accord. When I had that insight when I was in my early 20s about, if something came easy to me, I thought I didn't work hard enough and deserve it. That felt like the right way to be to me. With all of my being, it felt like the right way to be. but I just knew something wasn't right because it related so much to my parents and how they lived. And so going forward in that, when I found somebody to start helping me, I like see that it was like a light bulb came on. And the quicker the light bulb comes on, the quicker you can bring about that change.
Well, and I think that's so important for people to understand. I mean, those of us that have been on this journey for a while, I mean, I can't tell you how many coaches I've hired to help me in different areas, to try to get it. And as and I don't officially anymore work with people along that line, but I have friends who occasionally will call me or I'll be talking to them and they're saying, "Oh man, I'm struggling with this." And I'm going, "Well, have you thought about this?" Or, you know what, here's a podcast you might want to listen to. And all of a sudden, it's like, wow. In fact, I had I don't know how many times, of course, you get it a little bit differently because you've got people working with you, paying with you, and then they come back and say, wow. But I think a lot of times people who are doing things to try to make a difference in people's lives never get the feedback of what it did. And I remember a couple of months ago, I had met an individual here in Thailand, and they were helping me with the visa and so forth. And they spoke English a little bit better than most, and that's why they ended up coming to the desk and helping me. And I just mentioned, I said, "Well, you know what? I have a podcast." They go, "Oh, I'd love to listen." And so they started listening. And I got a message last month that just touched my heart because it's like, you know what? You have made a difference in my life. I'm a changed individual based on your podcasts and then obviously, talking to you once in a while and having questions and you offering some advice. And so often we don't hear that. And I think for a lot of people who are in a very subtle way, trying to make a difference in people's lives, they never get the feedback that says, you know what, that smile that you gave me last week made the difference. Or, here I was ready to do something horrible, and just what you said or just how you were changed my life.
Yeah. I, you know, I really love that I get to live this life doing this. I love everything I had to go through to get me to this point. And I'll tell you, Dr. Doug, when I'm talking to a client or I hear from or they'll call me up out of the blue, and say, "Oh my God, this just happened," and they have a break, it'll put me in tears. I'm so fulfilled and overjoyed at seeing what people can achieve. It, it's part of the process and stuff, and seeing that happen, I absolutely love that. And one of the things, we talked about the generics and things like that. One of the things is I have a 28-year-old son. He doesn't have to go until he's, in his 40s to do something. I'm seeing him now blossoming, and he has been over the last few years really blossoming with the tools and the things that I do just from our conversations and such. And so it's impact that, the generation thing going forward as well. I didn't set out to do that. I set out to fix me because I felt broken. I felt like I was undeserving on, all that stuff. And
Yeah.
in exchange, I get to have this impact on as many, hundreds of people I've gotten to work with over the past decade, my own son, people I meet, it's just amazing. It's just absolutely amazing.
Well, and you use the word suffering, and how often do we become a victim of suffering? I look at this concept of either we are a victim of or we are in control over. And so often people look at the suffering and become victimized by it. But just as you said, if we approach the suffering, because we all go through it. I mean, we all have things in our lives that we could look at as suffering, as we didn't deserve that, so forth. But as you said, you took all of that and you changed the direction of your thought process on that to where it became a lesson. It became a learning process. And because of your particular mindset and consciousness, you move that from suffering to success.
Yes, and here's the thing you were talking about with the monks with suffering and such. And here's the bottom line to it. Is you're absolutely right. That's the other one that's really strong up there with fear is victimhood. We're the victim. Where we grew up, what's in our bank account, the job we're in, things like that, or the relationship, it can even be, the marriage, things like that. We're victims. We see ourselves as victims of that. But do you know, really, there's so much power in struggle, because the purpose of struggle, the real gift and gold in struggle, is it's really a matter of a question. I don't want this. And then right back to the vision. So what do I want? So struggle can help us to place our focus on what we do want. That's the only purpose of it. And every time I've done that in my life, where I've been able to shift it over to what do I want, then all of a sudden I start opening up more of that vision in my life.
Well, but you talk about something that not a lot of people do. And I use the word curiosity. You have that struggle and you go, okay, I'm curious. Why am I having this struggle? What do I need to change so that I don't continue to have this struggle? And I'm curious as to what I really want. And then all of a sudden you're developing that vision. How do you help people to develop curiosity to where they're able to look at the struggle and go, okay, you know what? I don't have to accept this. I don't have to be a victim of it. But with curiosity, I can move that over into something that's going to teach me a lesson. And then if I positively use that to move forward that vision, it's going to make a difference.
Yeah, two-part answer to that. First off, I can't help anybody who doesn't have an open mind.
Yeah.
When I talk to people and I tell them some of the experiences, some of my, that my clients have had and such, they'll go, that's unrealistic. And for them, it will always be unrealistic to take leaps like that. So I can't do anything for them. So somebody's got to have an open mind in order to achieve any change. If they're locked into knowing what they know, even I'll have a lot of people come to me and we'll start talking and they'll go, I know, and I know. And I go, okay, that's great, all the stuff you know. But if you're stuck with that, that's as far as you're ever going to go. If you can look at what can I add to and be in search of what can I add to what I already know, that's how you start opening up that door. So there's that side of it. And then there's the other side of it is truly about what the dynamic vision. Think about having something that you read and it just excites the heck out of you, that you start seeing yourself living that life. It's described. You start talking about the feelings and you put on those feelings and you're experiencing that feeling even before it happens and stuff. That excitement leads to quick results. Those quick results, the first win is you win over people, because once they experience something really good like that, they want to do it again. They want to go further. They want to go bigger. That's a human condition. So just getting the first win like that opens up that avenue. And typically the vision is what opens that up. That's why it's so crucial and why the SMT method is designed to come out of the gate developing that vision.
So do you have some really dynamic stories that you can share with the audience of changes that have taken place within individuals' lives?
Yeah, I have a bunch of them. I'll share one of them. It'll take a few minutes, but I'll share one of them.
Okay, good.
So I met a gentleman probably about 6-7 years ago now. And when I met him, listening to him just talking, I thought, man, I'm going to need a dictionary to keep up with this guy, because like his vocabulary and stuff. But then as we talked further, I was like, man, this guy's he had a job. He was at the bottom of the company and stuff like that, and feared of losing his job and the anxiety of economy and all that stuff. He was married and his wife wore the pants in the family. She dictated what they were going to do, when they were going to do it, how they were going to do it, and everything else and stuff. And he was just very passive with that. He had 2 children that he wasn't really close with and didn't have a relationship. They were just like, give me money, dad type of kid, relationship. And I didn't find out till later the guy he was a musician. And so we're talking and right away it's like, man, there's that vocabulary just kind of caught something. So we started developing the vision. We got through that. In the 3rd week it came out, when this gentleman was I think it was the 4th grade. He went to a brand new school, knew nobody. So he had to do assessment testing before the school year started. So the first day of school, the bell rings, everybody goes in. He goes to the principal's office. Principal hands him this sheet of paper. He goes, man, look at your results. You're in the 8th grade reading. You're in college mathematics. And just his whole, across the board, he was like, and so he said, man, I'm really proud to have you here. And so he said, take this and go to class so-and-so and give it to your teacher. So we walk down. Now he's got to interrupt the whole class that's already started on the first day of school, not knowing anybody. He walks in, hands it to the teacher, and she looks at it and she goes, "Oh, look at so and so. He's in 8th grade reading. He's in college math," and berates this child in front of the whole classroom. And she ends it with, "I guess you should be teaching this class," and then sends him to a seat. He spent that entire year being bullied, picked on, and teased. And within that little boy's mind, he made a promise he would never let anybody see him, that side of him again. He was in elementary school. I met him, he was 51 or 52 years old, and he had maintained that promise all those years of that programming. And so as we started noting that, once we started identifying it, we could shift it, do perception shifting on, and some other tools that the SMT method utilizes to start bringing about that other side, start building a specific vision about that side and using, and how it, like that celebrated his intelligence and things like that. And as we did that, the guy called me 3 times over a week and a half outside of our session to tell me about these breakthroughs he was having and things like that, with his children. And the one I'll never forget is he called me on a Thursday night and he said, "Joseph, you're not going to believe this. I just had to call and share." And I go, "Okay, tell me. And so he said that he and his wife were talking, and they were talking about the plans for the weekend. And she said, "We're going to do this Friday. We're going to do this, and kind of went through the lineup and stuff." And he goes, "I don't want to do it like that." And he said that was the first time that he really stood up to her. And she turned and looked at him. And what it was is he wanted to add something family time into the whole thing that wasn't, in there. And he said she turned and looked at him and said, "That was so hot." Now, that's within a few weeks of working with this gentleman. I have another gentleman, he hired me as a business coach. And so this guy ended up flourishing in all areas of life, with his wife, with his children, even his business. He ended up, within 6 months, he ended up growing in the business. And he ended up being, when they hired somebody new, he would train that person to get them that quick start that he experienced and stuff. So I have another gentleman that hired me as a business coach, and he hired me. His team wasn't performing. He didn't want to have a coach come in and work with them, so he was going to get coaching and then bring it to his team. Okay, so we go through coaching. The 4th week we're working together. I think it was the 4th week. It came out that he had a 37-year marriage, and he and his wife just coexisted. The kids were grown and gone and stuff, and they lived in the same house as it. They shopped differently, they cooked differently. They had no interaction with each other at all. The 6th week he was working with me, he was at a live event I did. And so I said, "Hey, would you mind coming up and doing a testimonial?" And he goes, "No, not at all." So at the time I called him up and he shared just what I just told you. And I said, "Okay, so now it's been 3 more weeks, 4 more weeks, whatever. What's your life like today?" And he said, "My wife and I are like we're honeymooners again. We snuggle up and watch movies. We date. We eat together. We cook together. We, activities and things like that." And I said, "Okay, so we know that you've been working with me this time. What's your wife been doing?" And Dr. Dougie goes, "She hasn't been doing nothing."
And I think that's so key, that we don't realize that. In fact, I had interviewed someone else that had talked about relationships, and the fact that if I can change myself, more often than not, that other person is going to come around without ever going through the same process, just because of the effect we have. And we're getting close to the end here, by the way.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Okay.
these conversations go so great, and it's like, we could go on for hours, and I'm not allowed to do that.
Time flies, I tell you.
So as we come to a close, what would be a message that you'd like to share with the audience that could get them to really start thinking about what they could do?
Yeah. If you're in struggle, where you have upsets and things aren't the way you want them to be, it's not your fault. We're all designed to want to experience our desires in our life, and it's meant to be that way. But there's some programming covering that up for you. And you can go about it yourself and spend a lot of time doing it and figuring it out and everything else. or you can get a hold of somebody, me or somebody like me, that has a program that's tailored to your uniqueness, and go through it quicker and get to that other side and stop wasting life being stuck.
Amen. Amen. And so how do people find you? If, as they listen to this, they go, okay, I want to talk to Joey about what I'm going through. How do they find you?
Yeah, the easiest way to do it is go to coachwithjoey.com and schedule a 15-minute call. It's not a sales pitch. It's not, all I want to do is like from this, if you're calling from this podcast and you're at a place of struggle, or you're at a place of not knowing what that is, or you feel like you're getting stuck in it, just call me. I want to help however I can. So if I can help you get over that and move forward, and then we go from there. If it covers you and you're good to go from there, that's great. And if it's something, the program and stuff makes sense, that's a whole nother conversation. But it's really just to be of service.
Okay, and
Just
you've
reach
written
out,
some
coach
books.
with.
Is there one book that you'd like to share with the audience that might really make a difference for them?
Yeah, right behind me is a book, that blue book. It's Life's Lessons, and it's really all about when I stopped wanting to be a victim, and I started. You hear a lot about it now. You didn't when I wrote the book, but life happens. Life doesn't happen to us; it happens for us. And so once I could put the judgment of side of things happening, or it's not good or bad, right or wrong, and I could start looking at those events to what was it teaching me, is when I started learning my life's lessons that then would later on launch me into the life I live today.
Oh, I love it. Well, Joey, thanks so much. This has been incredible.
This was a delight, Dr. Doug. Absolutely.
I really appreciate it. And folks, hey, thanks for listening. I hope this is making a difference for you. And get a hold of Joey. Go to that website and take a look at what's going on, because I think for a lot of you, this could really make a difference in your lives. So anyway, this is Dr. Doug saying namaste.
Namaste.